idea.
The Acting Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.
The Prime Minister on indulgence.
Mr Speaker, and normally we wouldn't do this as a federal parliament, but I think this is a very unusual situation, and indeed the Queensland Parliament lost one of its state members to cancer last week. And I say very unusual because he was just 40 years young. Wacker Williams, the former Senator John Williams, once said to me, "No one should complain about getting old because some don't get the choice." And indeed, Duncan Pegg, sadly, lost his life. He was the member for Stretton. He died just 7 weeks after he announced he was retiring from politics to focus on his brave battle against cancer. He was just shy of his 41st birthday. Like all of us, he ended public life because he loved his country. He loved his state of Queensland and he loved his community. And they loved him. Because we saw that love returned many times over by his community in recent months. The children of Stretton sent countless get well and thank you cards. They remembered him turning up to all their concerts and events. They were handmade and heartfelt cards, absolutely beautiful. One Year 2 student from Runcorn State School wrote, "Mr Pegg, thank you for taking care of our school. You're the best." On April 29 there was a massive community farewell at Sunnybank Performing Arts Centre following his retirement from Parliament. The 300 seats were snapped up in hours and the waiting list saw it streamed on Facebook. And even though there were no seats left, they came anyway. They came anyway, just to honour and respect this wonderful man. I did not know him, but I read about him, I learnt about him, I reached out to the opposition leader last week and we had a long conversation about Duncan Pegg. And Duncan Pegg once said, "We've the most beautiful communities who have had to deal with things that others perhaps don't." He was a decent, he was a fair man. We could ask for nothing more. He embodied the best of his community. He courageously sought to serve it even though he was fighting cancer. He loved his community. As I say, they loved him back, and to Duncan's family we do extend our deepest condolences. May he rest in peace.
The member for Rankin on indulgence.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I want to thank the Acting Prime Minister for his genuine and kind words about our friend Duncan Pegg, and also particularly for mentioning those little cards that the kids from our community wrote to Duncan. They meant a lot to him, and so it's very nice of you to provide this opportunity, and to you, Speaker, for this opportunity to talk about Duncan on behalf of the Labor Party that he dedicated his entire adult life to. And I want to thank the Leader of the Opposition too for giving me the chance to say a few words about him. Duncan is known to many of us on this side of the House, by the Queensland contingent, of course, but by other members as well. He counted as a friend, the member for Grainler, the member for Maribyrnong, former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd as well. So many people on this side of the House knew Duncan for a really long time now. His state electorate of Stretton straddled the borders of my electorate and the member for Moreton as well. And we spent many a Friday or Saturday night at the Landmark restaurant doing community events with Duncan as his Mandarin got progressively better and Graham's and mine got progressively worse over the years. And it was our honour, wasn't it, mate, to serve the same people with Duncan Pegg. He was our mate and he was like a brother. Not that he needed more brothers. His parents, Graham and Lindsay, had 5 boys in 6 years, if you can believe it. First Duncan, who was the oldest, and then Cameron, Grant and Graham, who were the triplets, and then Lachlan as well. 5 boys in 6 years. Amazing. I know how much that truly wonderful family is hurting right now. I know how much they have to arrange. I know how proud they are of Duncan and how warranted that pride is in Duncan Pegg as well. I particularly want to thank Grant for the time that we were able to spend on the phone today talking about Duncan's life and Duncan's passing as well. The truth is that Duncan's passing was a long time coming in one sense. We knew it was coming for some time now, but when it did come last Thursday, around 3 o'clock in the morning, it didn't sting any less because we were expecting it. He was diagnosed with bowel cancer in October of 2019, but at the same time they discovered that it had already spread to his liver and his lungs as well. It was a truly devastating prognosis for Duncan. And by the time he got that last, most devastating prognosis in April of this year, he decided more or less on the spot in the hospital, having spoken to the doctor, that he was going to announce almost immediately that he would be retiring from the Queensland Parliament. And as the acting Prime Minister said, there was a big community farewell for Duncan in April. Around the end of April, it was my honour, along with about a dozen others, to say a few words there about Duncan's contribution to our community. And the member for Moreton got that chance, and Kevin Rudd and the Premier of Queensland. But I think most importantly, the heads of our local PNCs and some of our community groups. But the story that really stuck with me from that really quite remarkable community farewell event was that the day that Duncan found out that his cancer was terminal was in the morning, and he kept all his appointments in the afternoon. And one of the local music teachers in our area, who was known to us, she said that it didn't occur to her until some months down the track that the day that he came and helped open this music school for quite little kids in our area was the day that Duncan found out that he wouldn't be surviving this cancer that he had been diagnosed with. He didn't say a word that day. And for most of the subsequent 18 months or so, he didn't say much about his illness. He didn't want anybody to pity him. He didn't want others to suffer unnecessarily what he was going through. And that was just part of his selflessness, part of his kindness, part of his compassion. And only occasionally would you get a glimpse of how difficult things were for Duncan. For me, there were 3 occasions. On election night last year, when I was speaking to him after he got quite a stunning result in Stretton, an enviable result in Stretton, Graham, I spoke to him and he said it was nice to run up the score in the last time I run. And I said to him, "You'd be mad not to run again." And he said to me, "I don't think you understand, mate." That was one time. At Christmas, I said, "What are you going to be doing for Christmas?" And we talked about what our plans were, and he said that he would be spending a big chunk of that being treated. And also, a couple of Fridays ago, we've got this great school in our community, Stretton State College. They named their Performing Arts Centre after him because he was the instrumental figure in getting the Performing Arts Centre funded. He went to all the performances. He knew all of the kids, what instruments they played. It was really amazing. And they put that on as quickly as they could in the hope that Duncan could attend. And he wasn't there, and I knew that he would do almost anything to get there. His 4 brothers attended instead of him, and so that for me was a time when I realised that the time was getting really close. Duncan would have turned 41 on the 27th of this month. Instead, the funeral will be on the 26th. He was the son of regional Queensland. He was born in Townsville, but he grew up in Rocky. He came to Brisbane in the late 90s and he studied at Griffith University at the Nathan campus, and that's where I met him 23 years ago. I met him around the time he first joined the Labor Party. He joined the Labor Party for one reason in the beginning, and that's because he saw with the rise of Hansonism the damage that racism could do to our state and to our country, and so that enlivened him to get involved in politics, and so he joined the Australian Labor Party. And in all of that time, all of those 23 years that I've known him, he's always been kind and gregarious and humble and generous, but he's become more of each of those things as the years have gone on, and more idealistic as well. But because he's such a nice guy, people forget, and I don't want people to forget, that he was also a warrior. For students in the first instance, when I met him, for workers, he was an industrial lawyer. He worked for Shackers and others working in the industrial law system, and also a warrior for multiculturalism. He was a warrior for his schools, for his sporting groups. He was a warrior against injustice and discrimination. The first time he tried to win his state seat in 2012, like many others, he was unsuccessful. But he got elected in 2015, he increased his margin in 2017, and by the time of his last victory it was a 65% Labor seat. The more our community saw of Duncan, the more they loved him, the more they appreciated him, that he was never in a rush, like so many of us are, never in a rush to get from one thing to the next. He always had time for people. He always remembered people's names, and in our area, most importantly, he always remembered how to pronounce people's names. And we know how difficult that can be from time to time. They appreciated that he took the time to learn Mandarin, because his electorate had the biggest proportion of people born overseas in all of Queensland, and so he wanted to make sure that to the extent that that was possible, that he could speak to people in their original language. I think they appreciated too that as soon as he got that last prognosis, he made sure that he went to the Parliament and he said that he was retiring, because he didn't want his community to go any longer than was necessary with a member that was dedicating their time to fighting cancer rather than fighting for them. Mr. Speaker, I think Duncan was in on the secret, that in the final analysis only two things matter: being surrounded by people you love and who love you back, and being engaged in the cause of elevating others. The last time I spoke with him, we spoke about a few things. We spoke about our friends James Martin and Linus Power. We talked about whether his great friend Usman Khawaja could fight his way back into the Test team. Usman and Duncan have become great friends, and I want to acknowledge and thank Usman for that. Uzi's a great guy. I hope he gets back into the side. We talked about the Broncos. We talked about a whole range of things, but the thing I remember most was that he said, "I've been dealt a difficult hand at the end, but I've been dealt a magnificent hand for all of the other 40 years before that." He said that he had a great family and great friends, a great community, and he got to do something that he loved doing. He was prepared for the end, and he was at peace with it. We will never, ever forget him or what he meant to us.
As a mark of respect, I'd ask all present to rise in their places. I thank the House. The Leader of the House.
Did you want to speak?
Yeah.
Just like adults?
Yeah. Sorry, the Leader of the Opposition.
Yeah. Could I, Mr. Speaker, because that was we were going to refer matters to the Federation Chamber, but that's not possible under procedure. So we will make sure for those people on this side of the House in particular, but others as well, who wish to contribute to pay tribute to Duncan Pegg, we will provide an opportunity to do so. Yeah. And can I thank
just for the Leader of the Opposition, I'll give you indulgence on the general matter, but as the Acting Prime Minister said, it was unusual circumstances. That's why it's at the end of question time. If the House wishes to refer it to the Federation Chamber, we can do that, and then I'll just have a hang on, it's the member for Hughes. Yeah. The Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the House to enable further statements on indulgence in relation to the death of Duncan Pegg to be made in the Federation Chamber.
Leave granted. Leave is granted. The Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that further statements on indulgence in relation to the death of Duncan Pegg be permitted in the Federation Chamber and on indulgence. Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge firstly the initiation of the Acting Prime Minister in bringing this motion or this discussion on, a fine contribution and matched by the contribution of the member for Rankin. That was a fine moment in this Parliament's history and reflected on a fine man who left us way too early.
Yes, and just before I call the Leader of the Opposition, as I said, it's very different circumstances, and that's why it's occurred at the end of question time. And I would like the Leader of the Opposition just to have a brief indulgence just on the matter.
Very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the Leader of the House for the motion that he's moved, which will now allow for other contributions on the condolence for Duncan Pegg. And can I thank the Acting Prime Minister who reached out and showed, I think, a generosity of spirit in doing so. And I think what we've been left with is one of Parliament's finest moments in two great contributions worthy of Duncan Pegg by the Acting Prime Minister and by the Shadow Treasurer.
The Leader of... Oh, we've got to move. We've actually got to put the motion. So the question is that the motion moved by the Leader of the House be agreed to. And all those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Documents are tabled in accordance with the list circulated to honourable members earlier today. Full details of the documents will be recorded in the votes and proceedings.